When he walked in, the room changed, not gradually, instantly. A hush pressed down on the benches, the way a sudden gust quiets a field. This wasn't a kid with a ticket. This was a challenge stepping through the doorway. It had been an ordinary morning just seconds earlier. The clerk tapping her keyboard, the soft shuffle of older folks easing into their seats, the comfortable rhythm of Judge Caprio greeting people with that warm, familiar humor. A retired bus driver chuckled at a joke about parking signs. Two grandmothers discussed coupons in whispers. Everything felt predictable, safe, almost cozy. And then the door cracked open with a snap. A 19-year-old strode inside, wearing clothes that looked more Silicon Valley than Providence. Black designer hoodie, crisp sneakers, a phone sheathed in a gold case that caught every light in the room. He didn't head toward the microphone. No. He planted himself in the center aisle, facing the audience, as if he had just taken the stage at some streaming event. The clerk actually stopped typing mid-keystroke. That never happened here. A pair of women exchanged glances, the kind older New Englanders share when something's clearly off. "Oh boy," one murmured. Another TikTok star. His violation was simple on paper. A $55 ticket for stopping in a bus lane. Happens every week, usually resolved in under 2 minutes, but he shattered the rhythm immediately. "Let's make this quick," he said, without looking up from the glowing screen in his hand. "I've got a trade going live. Can't be here all day." A ripple went through the benches. Not outrage, not yet, but disbelief. The way he said trade, as if everyone else in the room lived underwater. The clerk called his name. Nothing. He kept typing furiously, thumb-tapping like a Morse code operator. Judge Caprio leaned forward with that polite firmness he reserved for younger defendants. "Sir, would you please approach the podium?" The kid let out a short laugh, the kind that isn't genuine humor, just a performance. "Relax, Judge. I'm right here. Let's just wrap this up." A retired couple in the second row stiffened. Someone's cane tapped the floor. It wasn't anger. It was the shock of hearing open disrespect in a place they still considered sacred. Judge Caprio remained steady, hands folded, voice measured. "How do you plead?" Only then did the young man lift his chin. A smirk tugged at his cheek, as if he had been waiting for this exact setup. "That depends." He tilted his head, all swagger. "Judge, you take Bitcoin?" The room froze. The clerk's hand hovered above the files. A man in the back blinked slowly, uncertain whether he'd heard correctly. And in that breath, that suspended, trembling silence, something shifted. It became unmistakably clear. This wasn't going to be a routine citation at all. This was the beginning of something much heavier. Something the kid himself didn't seem ready for. The smirk on his face didn't last long. Up close, under the courtroom lights, he looked less like a digital prodigy and more like someone trying very hard to seem untouchable. His hoodie, though expensive, hung awkwardly on his narrow shoulders. The gold phone case gleamed like a medal he hadn't earned, and beneath the practiced confidence in his eyes, there was a flicker, a quick, involuntary twitch, the kind that betrays nerves no matter how well someone masks them. Judge Caprio adjusted his glasses. "Let's start simple," he said gently. "Tell me who you are." The boy leaned one elbow on the podium, posture loose as if he were in a cafe instead of a courtroom. "I'm a trader," he announced. "Crypto. Since I was 14. I probably make more in a month than this court does in a year." The sentence landed with sharp edges, but his voice betrayed him. A faint quiver at the end, quickly swallowed. He flicked his hair back, pretending it hadn't slipped out. Caprio didn't react. He never rewarded theatrics. "All right," he said. "And how'd you get into that so young?" The kid inhaled, and for a second his gaze drifted. Not to the audience, not to the judge, but somewhere inward. "My family wasn't exactly flush," he said. "Mom's a nurse. Dad drove trucks until the company started automating routes. They barely held on to the house. It came out too fast, as though he hadn't meant to reveal that much. He straightened immediately, trying to reclaim the swagger. Anyway, crypto was the way out. I figured it out early. Now everyone treats me like some ATM. The bitterness in that last word didn't fit his confident act. The room sensed it. He shifted his weight, eyes dropping to his phone, though he wasn't typing anymore. People don't stay friends when they think you're successful, he muttered. They expect handouts, beg for advice, trash you when you stop giving it. Someone in the back sighed softly. Not judgment, recognition. And your family? Caprio asked. A strange hesitation crossed the young man's face. They don't get what I do, he whispered. They think I'm throwing my life away, but they don't say it. They just don't know how to talk to me. His thumb traced the edge of the phone case, a nervous habit. When I moved into my own place, it was supposed to feel like freedom, but it's just quiet. For the first time, he sounded 19, not invincible, just young. Caprio let the moment settle before speaking again. Let's talk about that morning. Why were you stopped in a bus lane for 7 minutes? The boy looked up sharply, the armor returning almost instantly. It wasn't a big deal. I got a notification about a trade, that's all. Needed to check. But his fingers trembled slightly as he gripped the phone. He tried to hide it by sliding his hand into his pocket. Caprio watched him carefully. 7 minutes is a long time to check something. It was urgent, the boy snapped, too defensively. A broker messaged me that some of my assets were compromised. I had to look. The room shifted, not sympathetically, but with new understanding. The bravado wasn't confidence. It was camouflage. And your attitude today? Caprio asked quietly. Is that urgency too? The boy scoffed, but his voice lacked conviction. I just don't like wasting time on things that don't matter. That's interesting, Caprio replied, because your acting like this matters a great deal. A brief silence stretched. Then the judge added, softer, You remind me of someone who's trying very hard to prove he doesn't need anyone. The boy's jaw tightened. He didn't deny it. Caprio leaned back. Let me ask you something. And I want the truth, not the polished version you give the internet. A slow beat. Why did you really stop there that morning? The boy swallowed. For a split second, the bravado cracked, exposing something raw behind it, and the room felt the tension coil, ready to snap. He opened his mouth, but the answer that came out was flimsy, rehearsed, the kind of excuse a teenager uses when he hasn't prepared a better one. I was just looking for the right street, he said quickly. GPS froze. Happens. Judge Caprio didn't challenge him with anger. He challenged him with silence, a steady, knowing look. Your phone seemed to function perfectly when you walked in today, he said gently. Did it only malfunction that morning? That mild tone felt sharper than any accusation. The boy's shoulders stiffened. It glitched, he said. What do you want me to tell you? Caprio reached for a file and slowly opened it. The room leaned forward as if pulled. There's something you should see. He lifted a printed photo, grainy, time-stamped, taken by the traffic unit. The camera caught the boy alone in his car, elbows on his knees, hands pressed to his head. Not defiant, not cocky, stranded in a moment of pure distress. The color drained from his face. You weren't lost, Caprio said softly. You were overwhelmed. A nervous laugh broke from the boy, brittle as cracked ice. Everybody has rough mornings. Caprio slid the photo back inside the folder. A rough morning or a severe loss? The question sliced through the courtroom. A few people exchanged glances. Someone inhaled sharply. Before the boy could build a shield of sarcasm again, a voice rose from the benches, hesitant, maternal. You looked frightened in that picture, sweetheart. A woman in her 50s, hands clasped on her lap, met his eyes. with quiet concern. Her tone held no judgment, just genuine worry. He reacted instantly, too instantly. "Don't call me that," he snapped, the edge in his voice sharper than necessary. But his gaze flickered away, as though her words had cut somewhere tender. The judge tapped a page with his finger. "There's another detail we need to address. This wasn't your first restricted lane stop." He paused. "It was your fifth in 8 weeks." A low murmur stirred across the room. This wasn't a coincidence anymore. It was a pattern, and an alarming one. The boy's jaw clenched. "So what? I didn't hurt anyone." "5 times, Caprio echoed. 5 moments when you were somewhere you shouldn't have been." He folded his hands, voice calm but firm. "That suggests something more than carelessness." The boy's composure began to fray. Anger, fear, and exhaustion battled behind his expression. "You don't get it," he blurted. "You have no idea what it's like." Caprio didn't raise his voice. "Try me." The challenge hung in the air. Not a threat, not a reprimand, but an invitation. A door opened for honesty. For a heartbeat, the boy wavered. His eyes dropped to the podium, then to the silent phone in his palm. His mouth parted as if he might finally explain, but then he shut the door himself. "It doesn't matter," he muttered, retreating. Caprio leaned forward just a fraction, enough to make the tension coil tighter. "Son, what exactly are you running from?" The boy lifted his eyes. For the first time that morning, they were stripped of arrogance, uncertain, cornered. The question hit something buried deep. He didn't answer. He couldn't. And for a moment, the entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the truth he was too scared to let out. The question lingered in the air like a held breath. "What exactly are you running from?" Something in him snapped, not violently, but with the brittle sound of a truth cracking open. "You don't understand," he burst out. His voice wasn't loud, but it trembled in a way that made the benches go still. "I could lose everything." It wasn't arrogance anymore. It was fear laid bare. Judge Caprio didn't flinch. "Everything," he repeated quietly. "Or everyone?" The boy blinked as if the words had landed somewhere he'd kept sealed. His chest rose and fell in a shaky rhythm. He stopped. His throat tightened around the next syllable. Caprio let the silence draw him out gently, the way someone coaxes a frightened child to step out from behind a door. Finally, the boy exhaled. "It wasn't just a bad trade," he said, voice low. "It was a margin call." A ripple went through the room. People who didn't understand the term still felt the weight in his tone. He gripped the podium. "I wasn't supposed to borrow more than I could cover. But the market dipped fast, too fast. Half my account vanished in one night." He swallowed hard. "I didn't just owe the platform. I also borrowed from a private guy, someone who doesn't send friendly reminders." He didn't name the man. He didn't need to. The implication washed across the courtroom like a chill draft. He said, if I didn't return the money this week, he'd meet me in person. A few older people in the room exchanged uneasy looks. The bravado of part 1 had evaporated completely. Caprio opened the file again, not dramatically, just with a careful, deliberate motion. "There's something else here." He lifted a sheet printed with a list of timestamps. "These are the calls you received that morning, all from the same number, all unanswered." The boy's face drained of color. "I didn't think they'd log that," he whispered. "You weren't avoiding the law," Caprio said. "You were scared of whoever was on the other end of those calls." A quiet gasp traveled across the benches. Suddenly, the photo from earlier made painful sense. The boy hunched over in his car, holding his head, trying to hold himself together. Behind him, the woman who had spoken earlier rose slowly. "I know his mother," she said, her voice soft but steady. "We worked the night shift together at the hospital." Every head turned. The boy's eyes widened. "You know her?" "She has no idea he's here today," the woman added gently. "She talks about him all the time, worries he's burning himself out." The boy looked as though someone had yanked the floor from under him. Caprio's tone shifted, warmer but firmer. "Is that why you've been acting like none of this matters? Because you don't want her to know how bad it's gotten?" The boy bit down on his lower lip, trying to hold himself together. His voice cracked despite his effort to steady it. "She worked double shifts for years so I could take a chance on something big. I was supposed to make her life easier, not—" He stopped, breath unsteady. "Not disappoint her." The courtroom grew impossibly quiet. Even the air seemed to hesitate. He wiped his palm against his hoodie as if trying to erase the truth he had just spoken. "I thought if I looked successful enough, confident enough, no one would see how close I am to losing control." Caprio nodded slowly. "Now we're finally talking." His voice wasn't triumphant. It was compassionate, the sound of someone meeting a young man exactly where he was, not where he pretended to be. And just like that, the case shifted from a traffic violation to something far more human. The storm had finally broken open. And what came next would reshape everything. Judge Caprio rested his hands on the bench, not in judgment, but in quiet understanding. The boy stood rigid, waiting for the blow he clearly expected, a lecture, a fine humiliation. Instead, Caprio spoke in a tone so steady it almost startled the room. "I'm not concerned about your Bitcoin," he said. "I'm concerned about you." The words struck harder than any reprimand. The boy's posture faltered, shoulders dropped. His grip on the podium loosened, as if he'd been holding onto it for balance rather than defiance. Without his bravado, his age became painfully clear. He looked like a young man who had sprinted too far without stopping to breathe. "How long have you been carrying all this alone?" Caprio asked. The boy hesitated, then let out a strained whisper. 4 nights. Haven't slept. Every time my phone buzzes, I think it's him, or the exchange, or something worse." His voice shook, not from tears, but from exhaustion so deep it had worn the edges off everything. "I don't tell my mom because if she knows I messed up, she'll blame herself. She thinks she didn't work hard enough, that she didn't guide me right." He stared at the floor, ashamed. "I didn't want her to think she raised a failure." Caprio didn't interrupt. He let the confession unfold at its own fragile pace. "And you've been hiding?" the judge asked softly. The boy nodded. "I screen every call. I barely step outside. The only place I felt safe was in my car. Even that morning. I just needed a minute. 1 minute where I didn't feel like the world was closing in." A few people in the courtroom looked down, moved by the rawness of his voice. The woman who knew his mother clasped her hands tighter. Then Caprio did something no one expected. "Sit down," he said. "I want you to hear something." The boy blinked, confused. "I'm not—" "Sit," Caprio repeated, kinder this time. He obeyed, lowering himself into the defendant's chair like someone unaccustomed to being guided. Caprio pulled out a thin envelope nestled in the case file. "This is a letter your mother wrote months ago when you had a different citation. She asked the court not to be too lenient." The boy's eyes widened, startled, almost betrayed. Caprio unfolded the page and read, "He's a good kid, but he thinks growing up means outrunning everyone. Please be firm. He listens to everyone but me." The boy closed his eyes, absorbing each word like a blow and a blessing at once. "She wasn't angry," Caprio added. "She was worried." For a long moment, nothing moved. Then the boy whispered, barely audible, "I don't want her to be disappointed." Caprio answered with a quiet certainty that cut straight through the boy's fear. "She'll be far more disappointed if you keep hiding from the truth." Another beat passed. "And before I decide anything today," the judge continued, "you're going to call her." "Right. Here, in this courtroom, and tell her what's going on." The reaction was immediate, a mixture of gasps, sympathetic chuckles, and stunned silence. The boy's face drained as if he'd been told to walk a tightrope over open water. Right now," he stammered. "Yes," Caprio said. "Right now." There was no challenge in the judge's tone, just a belief that honesty would save him more than punishment ever could. With trembling hands, the boy pulled out his phone. For the first time since he entered the court, he wasn't performing for anyone. He was simply scared and ready. He pressed the call button. A soft ring echoed through the quiet room. "Mom?" His voice cracked. "I messed up." The courtroom held its breath. There was a pause on the line. Then a warm, steady voice answered, "Come home." The boy closed his eyes, relief washing over him in a visible wave. Caprio waited, giving him the space to breathe. When the call ended, the judge leaned forward slightly. "All right," he said. "Now let's finish this properly." When the boy put his phone down, the courtroom seemed to exhale with him. The tension that had clung to him since he walked in began to loosen thread by thread, though he still sat with his hands clasped tightly, waiting for the judgment that would decide what came next. Judge Caprio folded the letter from the mother with deliberate care, as though returning it to a place of dignity rather than a case file. Then he looked up, not with authority, but with the steady calm of someone who had guided thousands through storms of their own making. "I'm going to give you a ruling," he said, "but I want you to hear the meaning behind it, not just the words." The boy straightened, bracing himself. "This violation carries a standard fee," Caprio continued, "and you're paying it. No discounts today." A few people nodded, as if that much felt predictable. "But that's not the end of it," Caprio added, and the room sharpened again. "You're coming back in 30 days, same time, same courtroom." A soft murmur traveled across the benches. The boy blinked, unsure if he'd heard correctly. "And you're not coming alone," Caprio said. "Your mother will be with you." The reaction was immediate. Not laughter, not surprise exactly, but a hushed recognition that this condition wasn't punishment. It was accountability braided with compassion. The boy opened his mouth, then closed it again. His eyes lowered not in shame, but in something closer to humility. Caprio leaned forward slightly. "This isn't about a traffic lane. This is about the direction you're taking. I don't want you facing that alone." He paused, letting the message settle. "And bring your Bitcoin wallet statements with you. I want to teach you something about responsibility." That line drew a ripple of soft amusement, the warm, restrained kind older New Englanders allow themselves when they witness a young man being nudged toward steadier ground. The boy didn't flinch at the mention of his finances. Instead, he nodded once, quietly, like someone finally ready to stop running. "Thank you," he said. The words came out small, but sincere. "I needed someone to tell me where to stand." The room didn't applaud. It didn't need to. There was a stillness that carried more weight than noise, people absorbing the rare sight of a young life gently redirected instead of crushed. One woman dabbed her eye with the corner of a tissue. A man in the back folded his arms, not in disapproval, but in something like solemn support. The boy rose from his chair. For the first time that morning, he didn't fidget with his phone, didn't check a screen for an update on his fading trades. He simply stood and looked at the judge as if recognizing, perhaps for the first time, that guidance isn't weakness. As he stepped toward the exit, Caprio offered one last sentence, steady, measured, almost fatherly. "Son, it's never too late to grow up." The boy paused at the doors. The sunlight from the hallway spilled across the floor, catching the gold case of his phone. He lifted it, thumb hovering over the screen. Then, with a soft click, he locked it and slipped it into his pocket. Not avoidance, not escape, A choice. He walked out without checking a single notification. The courtroom watched him go, wrapped in a quiet that felt like hope. And as the heavy doors eased shut behind him, one thought lingered in the minds of everyone who had witnessed the morning unfold. What would happen at that 30-day hearing was a story waiting to be told.